Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this month's session of Your Morning Briefing, a monthly webinar series designed to keep you informed and ahead of the curve on labor and employment topics, all in the time it takes to finish your morning cup of coffee. I'm Anna McCarthy, and I'm joined by my guest co-host, Ben Mudrick.
Good morning. I got my hot chocolate.
So we've taken a bit of a break for the last month, but we were happy to see some of you in person at our interactive HR Legal Lab in October, which was great. It's really great to get back in person, talk about some things, and really get hands-on with some human resources topics. So that was really great. But we're back today with your morning briefing, and this is an extension of my discussion with Amy back in September that I know you tuned into,
Of course.
about the use of AI in the workplace. So in September, we talked about AI and the use of AI in hiring and recruiting. And in this session, we're going to move sort of beyond that initial employment phase, right? And talk a little bit more about policy development and then the use of AI for and with current employees. So performance evaluation, management, things like that. And I know we've gotten some questions from people about these areas, and it's definitely still a new area, still developing, but I think there are some things that employers can do that frankly our own firm has done to address the use of AI. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Is this something that you've seen, Ben, when you've talked with clients lately?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the big question everyone has to think about right now. And whatever business you're in, if you're not thinking about how AI is going to impact your business, then you're probably behind the curve. Um, and doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same answer for every employer, but it's something that everyone should be thinking about, and HR specifically needs to be thinking about as well. Um, if you're not thinking about AI and how it's going to help you, or whether it is going to be helpful, somebody above you might be thinking about whether it will be helpful as well. So,
Yeah.
make sure you know uh, what systems are there, and we'll talk through some of the policy issues we should be thinking about today.
Yeah. Before we get started, though, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items that we always do. So, as most of you know, if you've tuned in before, this webinar has been approved for a half credit of HRCI and SHRM credit, not CLE credit this time, but we'll give some instructions at the end of this webinar on how to submit for that later. As always, this webinar is intended for general information purposes only. It should not be considered as legal advice. And all of your lines have been placed on mute. So if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A widget on your toolbar. Don't use the raise hand feature because we won't be able to see that. Feel free to submit questions at any time. And at the end, we'll try and address questions if we've got some time to do that. So where should we start?
Yeah, so I had a client a couple years ago, one of my favorite clients, maybe listening today. But she reached out one day and she said, "Hey, Ben, we need an AI policy. What do we do?" And I said, "Well, it can definitely help with that. What do you want to do with HI or with AI? How are you going to use it?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. We just need a policy." And I said, "Well, do you want your employees to use it or do you not want them to use it?" She said, "Well, I don't know. We have to have a policy for that." And we kind of went in this circle, and it was a really interesting conversation, I think, for both of us. This was just when it was starting. She was really at the forefront of thinking about AI, but she really hadn't answered those questions about what do we want to use it for? What do we need it for? What are some of the safeguards we're going to be putting around it? So I think there's a lot of people in HR right now who are thinking, okay, we have to adopt an AI policy. But before you can adopt the policy, you got to think about what's the whole point of it, right? What do you want to do? What do you want to use it for? In our circumstance at Harder Seacrest, we are using AI where necessary, but there's certain things that we can't use it for, we don't want to use it for, or our clients wouldn't want us to use it for. You've read cases or news articles about lawyers who are submitting briefs to courts with hallucinated cases and things like that. And that's something we are very, very thoughtful about and very careful about. We don't want to cross that line, but also we want to make sure we're using all the tools available to help our clients. So I think the first thing you need to do as you're thinking about AI policies is you probably don't want to use AI to draft your AI policy from the starting point, right?
Yeah.
It may be helpful for a first tool, but you got to think about what is it that you actually want? Do you have the right safeguards and guidelines in place? You need to ensure that your policy complies with the law and is keeping up with the law on this. So I think the first thing to do, rather than just start drafting as a policy, is get together with the technology leadership at your firm, with some of the stakeholders, and think about where you are in this AI timeline and what you actually want to accomplish. And then you can start thinking about what needs to be addressed in the policy itself. In the policy, I think you need to think about what applications are permitted, which ones are prohibited. There are different AI products out there now, and they will give you different answers. And if you have employees just using whichever product they want, there's going to be inconsistency in what they use. When and how are employees permitted to use AI? What types of projects can they use it for? Do they need to disclose when they're using AI? That's one of the things that we talk about a lot in our firm. If I have an associate who's working on a project for me and they use AI for research or something like that, I tell them you have to let me know if you've used AI in any way, because there's some check boxes you need to go through and make sure things are correct. When is it prohibited? Are there certain things that you shouldn't be doing with AI? And you need to be very clear with your employees about what those things are. Do you have specific AI tools for specific projects? We have a specific tool that we use that has guardrails on it and doesn't share the information. It's a closed box, so it can't share that information. What training is required? Do employees need to sign off on policies or show that they went through training? One of the things we think about a lot from a legal standpoint, I think HR needs to think about the same thing, is there are open AI systems where anything you upload into the AI system is going to be part of the mothership, or whatever you want to call it, right? It's going to go into the AI system and it can be used by other people. Well, we have confidential client information that we cannot disclose. So if we're going to use anything like that in an AI product, it needs to be a closed AI product that doesn't share it anywhere and where that information is deleted after you're done using it. If you're using AI for sensitive employee issues in HR, or your employees outside of HR are using confidential client information or confidential company information, you really want to be careful that they're not putting that into ChatGPT or Gemini, where it's just part of the system going forward. So have you really thought through those issues, and have your employees thought through those issues? I know that's a lot, and we're going to talk through some of these things, but really, I think you need to come up with, what is your overall AI strategy? What are the types of things you think you need to use it for, whether in HR or outside of HR? And then that should drive your policy. You can't just take the AI policy that came from the employee handbook website or even directly from a law firm if you haven't thought through what your actual strategy is with it.
When you bring up a good point about industry specific rules, so you mentioned the hallucinated cases, a lot of courts have implemented either localized rules or broader rules about whether or not AI can be used in front of a particular judge or in a particular district. And so that may apply, I imagine, to many of our clients' own industries. There may be industry specific rules that they have to think about before they even sit down to start drafting the policy. There's a lot of pending and new AI legislation in the healthcare space, in the employment space, in the technology space. And so there may be industry specific rules that already have placed guardrails on how and when you use AI that will then flow down to how and when you can even use it in your own workplace.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, who is using AI?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of senior level employees who still see it as a new thing and are wondering, oh, can we use it for this? Or am I worried about it? Whereas you probably have employees who are newer in your company who are using it for everything and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
So you need to get a feel for what people are already doing with AI and whether you need to start pulling that in a little bit.
Right. That's a great, sorry.
No, I was going to say the industry thing is that's an interesting topic as well. I don't know the answer to all of that. I don't know what the farm agriculture industry is saying about AI right now, but you probably do, or you have people in your organization who do, and there are organizational resources that you may have access to. So it is a good thing to start asking around, see what other people are doing, see what people are doing within the industry, because your AI policy is going to be different than maybe your competitors or somebody in a different industry. And if you just pull an off the shelf policy, it's not going to address the needs that you have, and it's not going to address the real realities that you're facing with your employees and what they're using it for.
Yeah, and I think it extends beyond just an AI specific policy, right? Like there are probably any number of policies in your employee handbook that might touch on the use of AI. So whether that's standards of conduct, whether it's policy and or rather device management. Do your employees use their own cell phones? Do you have them use company cell phones? There are AI apps now that you can download and use and input content into. so the device management side of things I think is important to think about. There's also record management. So if you have a records retention policy, some of those new laws cover what records you need to keep if you use AI and when those records might need to be disclosed. And so you might need to tweak or change your record retention policies. And then, of course, privacy and data security. So we have colleagues in our privacy and data security group that are sort of on the forefront of the use and implementation of AI, and they're always thinking about things like security breaches and the proper use of the technology so as not to cause breaches of confidentiality and things like that. So it's not just that new policy you're thinking of drafting, right? It's probably, do you need to take a look at your handbook and maybe highlight a few policies that might need to be tweaked if you're going to start using AI so that you don't run into breaches of your proprietary data or other security breaches of personal information, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting issue that I haven't thought a lot about. When an employee leaves, we get so nervous about them sticking the thumb drive into the computer, emailing themselves all this information.
Mm-hmm.
But if they've been using their own ChatGPT account
Yeah.
to do work with letting you know or not letting you know, when they leave employment, they have a whole record of all the searches that they've done and all the information that they've gotten back. And that's not something we can just scan on the computer and say, oh, did they steal this information? It's no, they have this. So as an employer, if you're just letting employees use whatever AI system they want on their own personal devices or on their own personal accounts, you could be creating a situation where they have access to lots of confidential information.
Mm-hmm.
When they leave employment. And it's going to be hard to track that. And if you aren't looking at all of your policies, like Anna said, you could really put yourself in a difficult position. We did get a question in that I think is relevant is about how does this apply to the public sector or public sector employers. I haven't put a lot of thought into the difference there, but as I'm talking about this, I think one important thing is there are real strong record keeping requirements for public sector employers.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you do certain things, you have to keep records of them. There's freedom of information laws. And again, are AI searches or are AI queries and the responses from an AI system a public record? I don't know the answer to that. That's something you need to think about and talk to your counsel about. We have colleagues who deal with this in the public sector space who we can talk to on that. But it's something to be thoughtful about that you are creating records, whatever AI is spitting back out at you could be a public record going forward. So you need to be thoughtful about that part of it. I don't know if there's anything else in the public sector that you think.
Yeah, just on that point, because we're talking about records retention and public sector employees, and this would apply, I think, in the public or the private sector space. But one thing to think about is keeping really strong records of both the input and the output into, the input, the information inputting into the AI tool, and then the output. So that you're not losing sort of that timeline of what the information is and what it looks like and what you're generating versus what the AI tool is generating. I think the difference may be important in terms of what information you might need to disclose in response to a FOIA request or in response to a request from a state agency. And then the other thing, and this again would apply in both the private and the public sector, you have to think about how implementing AI tools might affect union relations. Mm-hmm. So if you're a unionized workforce, whether public or private, you have to think about whether or not the AI tool is going to impact the terms and conditions of employment for your employees. And is this something you need to be speaking about with the union representative? Are you using it to monitor your employees' performance? Are you using it to monitor their productivity, creating schedules, things like that? So something to think about. Again, it crosses the public and private sector lines, but just another way that AI is going to impact the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've been talking about, and we've been touching on sort of pending legislation, and I wanted to bring up a few laws that I think are kind of interesting to think about because they're relatively recent. They have to do with the employment law space. One of them has been around for a little bit. It's a New York City local law. So if you're not in New York City, it's not going to apply to your own workplace, but I think it's sort of a bit of a bellwether for what we might see legislation do as the months and years go on in terms of the development of policy and law. So this local law specifically sets out rules for the use of automated devices to make automated employment decisions, whether in hiring or for promotion or compensation purposes. I believe actually this law is specific to hiring and promotion, although compensation is tied up into that, of course. So in that case, employers are required to have an independent bias audit conducted prior to the implementation of the tool, and then periodically if they're going to be continuing to use that tool to make sure that they're trying to catch instances or to make sure that there are opportunities for employers to catch instances of bias in the use of that automated employment decision-making device. There's also, I believe, record retention requirements as well as notice requirements. So you have to provide notice to your applicants, for example, that you're using this tool. So that's one example of how it's already been regulated. The use of AI has already been regulated. California also very recently passed a law that just became effective the last month or the month before about using automated decision systems and the fact that you can't use automated decision systems if they're going to discriminate against applicants and employees, which seems like a very basic concept. But again, it's sort of just this is how legislators are sort of dipping their toe into legislating this space. And then we're also seeing in Illinois and in guidance form in New Jersey, the amendment of human rights laws or human rights focused laws that infuse AI into anti-discrimination provisions, and that you can't use AI to discriminate based on protected categories.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting issue. When that New York City ordinance passed a few years ago, this was really before kind of chat GPT, right? I think they were I think ahead of the curve, but we were all sitting in our offices like, how do you do a AI bias audit? You know, and I thought I could make a fortune if I created an AI bias platform or something, but of course I didn't do that. Which is why I'm sitting here with you today. But no, it's one of those things that I don't know if a new law is necessary, right? I think even under the old human rights law or California law, if you had an AI system that was discriminating based on a protected characteristic, somebody would still have a claim.
Sure.
But like you said, the fact that these laws are passing and they're clarifying the law just shows that these are on the agencies and those legislators' minds, and you need to be thoughtful about it. And it is so easy to just rely on an AI product off the shelf or just something that you find online and think it's making your life easier, when in the long run, if you're not doing the research, if you don't have the right policies, if you haven't done the bias audit, it can end up creating a real problem. And your defense can't be, I didn't know AI was doing that. I didn't know AI discriminated. You gotta really dig into that before you start using it. And again, we are not Luddites. We're not saying don't use AI. We think it can make your life easier in some ways, but you gotta make sure you go in with your eyes wide open and you do it in a consistent way across your company and across your HR team.
Yeah. And speaking of other ways that AI can be used, what are your thoughts on using it for performance management and for evaluating employees?
Yeah, so this is one of the with the HR partners who we work with, one of the things they've reached out a lot about is using it for performance evaluations, performance management. I haven't, in my own management life, haven't done this yet, but people will plug in different employee product or cross board and have it help them come up with evaluations. I think that may be okay. I think a performance evaluation is it's a job related decision. It's a job related impact. So getting a good or a poor performance evaluation can potentially be an adverse employment action under the discrimination law. So just like Anna said, if you're going to use AI for hiring, and I know we talked about this during our last session, you need to be thoughtful about whether it's discriminating. In the same way, if you use it to help with performance evaluation, whether that's helping you draft the evaluation or compare employees across different ways, again, I think it can be helpful, but you need to do it in a way that doesn't discriminate. So you need to check things manually. You need to make sure the information is accurate. You need to understand that different AI products may give different answers on things, right? And I think something we've seen recently, especially with ChatGPT, is that as they update the software and the model, it's now changing answers, right? Over time, it has different opinions on things. So if you're going to have consistent performance evaluations year over year, but the AI model is changing or you switch models, they may not be consistent. So I think at this stage, and look, you may know better than I do. You probably do about how to make it work and how it's helpful. But I think, again, you got to check things manually. I think I use it more to help with stylistic parts of a performance review,
Sure.
helping you draft things or come up with language rather than kind of the nuts and bolts comparison or the qualitative review of someone's performance. I think it should be a tool to help you with the performance evaluation you're creating. You shouldn't be kind of relying on the ultimate output from the AI.
That's an interesting idea. So sort of helping you maybe with the messaging, you come up with sort of the basic conclusion, but maybe helping using AI to help you message that conclusion to the employee. That being said, I think we've also seen where AI is used and it does not, it sounds artificial. It does sound artificial. It doesn't sound like it's coming from that particular supervisor or that particular manager. So I think it's also really important to, once you use that tool, to actually engage with it and make sure that the output is not only what you think is appropriate for the situation, but also sounds like it's coming from you. And doesn't sound like it's being automatically generated, because I think that just from an employee relations standpoint, I think could be problematic. Whether or not that's, violative of the law because it's discriminatory is sort of a separate calculation. But even if that's not the issue, having it be something that, sounds out of place can, I think, be problematic when you're having maybe a difficult conversation with an employee about their performance.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we see, and if you've ever been to one of our trainings, we always say this, right? If it's not in writing, it never happened. Or we always get that phone call where a client calls us, oh, we need to get rid of this problem employee. They're doing such a horrible job. And then I say, okay, great. Can we see their performance evaluations? And they're all positive. Or we say, do you have any disciplinary notes? Like, no, I only talked to the person. It's really hard as a manager to document performance issues. And AI, I think, can be a really good tool for this. When you're talking to your managers about, hey, when you talk to the employee, you got to keep notes or you got to follow up with the employee writing. I think AI can be a really good tool to help your managers be more consistent about that. And again, AI isn't creating the substance of it, but it's a tool that lets your managers, rather than having to sit down in their office after a difficult conversation and write that email, I want to follow up on the discussion we had. There are AI tools that can help them track that performance. And that's going to be helpful with performance going forward. Again, AI shouldn't be making the performance determination, but it should be helping people pull things together in a way that creates a record, is consistent, and it will help. If you compare performance evaluations, you can show if you're being consistent across employees and the type of language you're using and the types of decisions that you're making.
Yeah, I agree that I think it can be really helpful to use AI to sort of have an objective perspective on the data you're considering, on the situation that you're looking at. But back to your point about, different outcomes depending on what AI tool you're using or the version of AI tool that you're using. I think we've already seen that it is possible, or of course it's possible because there are creators of these AI tools. So these creators can tweak these models or potentially tweak the AI tool to favor a specific type of output. So I think it's important to consider the evolution of the AI tool as you're maybe periodically auditing or checking it to see what these results are that you're getting from the tool, to make sure that they're consistent with the way that you would have been doing things without that tool, which does, to your point, create more work for yourself. And the idea of using AI is to have it be an efficiency tool, I imagine. But it's really important, at least on the front end, as you're getting used to incorporating this into your workplace, that you're making sure that you're not relying too much on it, and ending up with inconsistent results or incorrect results, even more than you would if you just had your own employees doing these things.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you've been reading about this, but X or Twitter, they have their AI program Grok.
Yeah.
And I guess they tweaked it recently where it only says positive things about Elon Musk. I don't know if you've seen this, but like if you end up hiring Elon Musk, just recognize he's going to be your top employee according to AI, right? And that's kind of silly, but there are biases in these systems, and you don't know how that's going to work. And I think part of it is just being thoughtful, being consistent, and just like you said, always take a step back and realize that you're the one making the decision, and you can't defer that decision to AI. You and your company has to do it, because if there's a lawsuit, it's not a good defense to say AI did it,
right?
Because again, these laws are showing us the agencies are still going to say that AI can be discriminatory, can be biased. So you need to be able to give that legitimate business justification for the decisions that you're making.
And one maybe specific example of a potentially discriminatory result would be, if you're looking at the results and you're specifically one example of what you want to look for is there a disparate impact on a particular group of people? So consider everyone you've evaluated, maybe if you're using it for performance evaluation, and look at who's getting the highest results or the best performance marks and who's getting maybe lower performance marks, if that's what you're using the AI tool for. And if you're finding that it's having a disproportionate impact on a particular group of people, maybe based on a protected characteristic, don't assume that that's a coincidence, and dig a little deeper and see if you can determine why it's maybe having a disparate impact on a particular group of people. Or even if you can't determine that it is, just the simple fact that it's having a disparate impact is potentially problematic. There could be a justification for it that is a business related justification, but you don't know without digging into it. It could be, for example, if it's evaluating writing pieces from employees, if an employee has maybe different use of grammar and words than another employee, it's possible that that is rooted in maybe the fact that English isn't their first language. And AI doesn't know that. You as the supervisor might know that, but AI doesn't know that. It just knows what you've input into the machine or into its tool. So it might be, poorly rating someone who uses grammar and wording differently because English isn't their first language. And so you need to be thoughtful about why it might end up with particular results because of what you're inputting, and also because of what it doesn't know that you as the supervisor or the manager or the human resource professional does know. So we're getting close to the end of time. I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about, in addition to policy development, some other things that you can do to sort of prepare yourself for the use of AI. And I think, Ben, you already mentioned thinking, having a meeting just to sort of level set and decide, do we even need to use AI, and what would we need to use it for before we start putting pen to paper in terms of policy development? I think in addition to that, you want to be doing some test runs. Are there different types of AI tools out there that might be helpful to you, and maybe do a test implementation of those tools to see what happens when you use them. And then maybe once you settle on that tool, making sure you're training your employees. And in fact, we did that the other day here at Harder Seacrest. We took training on the use of an AI tool before we were permitted to use that tool in very particular ways. So policy development, training, I think all of those things are really important. And then that regular checking in on the device to see if it's continuing to work for you the way that any training or device should continue to work for you. So, you regularly check in on your policies in your employee handbook. You regularly update your employee trainings. This is no different and should be treated similarly. Not allowed to get stale or go unchecked.
Yeah, I really liked how we did it as a firm, and I wasn't in charge of it, so I can't take credit for it. But we had the training for the AI tool, but the employees and partners as well couldn't access the tool until they took the training, they reviewed the policy and signed off on it. They answered some questions about the policy. Like, there are steps you had to take before we turned on the tool. And I think that's the right way to handle it in most cases, that don't be afraid of AI, but make sure you're doing it in a consistent way, where your policy actually reflects what you're trying to accomplish and your employees are trained and ready to do it in accordance with that policy.
Yeah. So because we're getting close to the end of time, I want to make sure that we give the codes out for those who need credit. So those will pop onto your screen in just a moment if they haven't already. So if you need HRCI credit for this webinar, the activity ID number is 724897, and the SHRM code is 25-UU5AH. And you can enter those into their respective portals to submit for credit. So we've been answering questions as they've been coming in. I'm just going to check now to see if we have any more before we wrap up for today, and I talk a little bit about our next session. So Ben, do you see any more questions that we haven't addressed that have come in? Just taking a look now.
No, we've covered most of them during the discussion. So
perfect.
What's next?
I think I just wanted to say really quickly to sort of recap this year. So this is the second year we've had your morning briefings, and I feel like there's been a kind of a shift in the types of topics we've covered this year. Last year, almost every month we had a new law to talk about, new update in employment law, whether at the federal level or the New York State level. And this year, it's been a lot of just sort of reacting to shifting enforcement priorities and challenges that have mainly come from the federal administration. I don't think that's going to change in the new year. I think we're going to continue to see shifts at the federal level, lots of changes at federal agency levels. We've already seen a lot of changes and they just continue to come. As a recent example, the newly appointed director of the OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, just went over to the EEOC and is now their Deputy Chief General Counsel. So I think we're going to continue to see those shifts. So look in the new year, I think, for us to continue talking about those shifts in enforcement priorities and reacting to federal guidance as it comes. And I think that's maybe going to be one of the bigger challenges for the new year. I'm sure we'll also see some state level laws that we'll talk about in these sessions, but I think that's probably going to be maybe the biggest thing that we'll at least start the new year with.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add is I think there's a sense that hiring is slowing down right now, and some companies are reaching out about layoffs and really those difficult decisions you have to make. If it's your first time thinking about those types of decisions, that's something we need to talk through, and you may need to talk through with an attorney is how to handle those situations, whether it's the WARN Act or waivers for mass layoffs. I hate to be talking about that during the holiday season, but that's a big topic that we've seen a lot more recently in May in the new year be something that comes up.
Ben, I think you just came up with our next Your Morning Briefing topic.
We'll see. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate you tuning in every month. It's always great to have a chance to connect, even virtually like this, and we hope you tune in for our next session. Keep an eye out for an email with our next scheduled date and topic in the new year. And thank you again. Have a great day.